If your darling boyfriend is a blood-sucking vampire, what would you do? You just got thrown into a supernatural world that you know nothing about, and now your life is in danger, and you're gonna have to get into life-threatening situations multiple times, get down and nasty with your boo in a kind of a science lab, and jump over rooftops just to help your baby control his bloodlust. I'm gonna break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the vampire hunters in Devil's Line. Tsukasa is your everyday nerdy girl with no relationship scandal, and of course she's the teacher's favorite, and even has this stuffy guy as her friend, but of course she wants nothing to do with him because she's a nerd. So she enters the train to head home with her friends after school, but that's when she notices someone watching her. Inside her train, people talk about the recent murders that look like vampire attacks. Meanwhile, the police chase down a vampire accused of draining a woman completely. They leave the investigation to Public Security Division 5. Now, Tsukasa's friend watches an exposition on the vampires over her phone. Now, of course, Studface blows her off by calling it a weird cult obsession without proof because it was never come up on the news. Now, Tsukasa shakes off the feeling of being stalked because she can't find the figure who was stalking her anymore. But outside, the police close down on the suspect and lead him towards an officer named Jill. When Jill shows up, she fights off the vampire like she's some original and gets him cuffed. But no one notices this white-haired dude in the distance watching them. Tsukasa gets off the train and Studface offers to walk her home like the goody two-shoes that he is. And he tells her that although she turned him down, he's happy she doesn't have a boyfriend yet because he believes that if she gets into a relationship, well, he won't survive. Just then, at the junction, Tsukasa sees the same stalker dude she thought she was imagining earlier, and he's staring at her very creepily, like super intently. It seems Studface also notices the dude because he suddenly grabs her hand and starts walking away like they're in danger. He even takes her off their usual route, and as they're running, Tsukasa takes a moment to rest and informs Studface that she thinks someone has been following her. Instead of concentrating on their predicament, Studface starts staring at her funny, then suddenly hugs her and pats her on the head like saying it's time for them to just continue on. And that's when Stalker shows up by calling Studface a vampire. At the same time, he grabs Tsukasa, puts some distance behind her and Studface, and Stalker shows Studface some blood from a cut on his finger, and that's when his eyes suddenly go blood red. Now, Studface warns Stalker, leave him alone because he's never going to hurt Tsukasa. But that's when Stalker accuses him. He says Studface won't hurt Tsukasa because he's been going around murdering other women and drinking their blood to keep himself from hurting her. And this touches a nerve with Studface, so he grabs Stalker by the throat. But Stalker has enough evidence and announces that some of his, well, milky juice or whatever it is has found its way on the victims at the crime scenes. Now, Stalker tells Studface to let himself get arrested because once a vampire has tasted the pleasure that comes from having their way, they are guaranteed to kill again and again. Now, Studface finally admits to committing the offense. Does feel bad because he has to choose between hurting other women and hurting Tsukasa, who he genuinely likes. Okay, we're gonna look at this from the lens of the girl. You've known this guy for a while, you've gotten comfortable around him, you don't think this is gonna be what's gonna happen. Now, if I was Tsukasa, I would be really hurt right now. She's been friends with this guy for heavens knows how long. They're going to New Year's parties, share notes. They spent a lot of time together, but she now knows that the world's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are real monsters out there. They can be as close to her as Studface was. Not prepared at all for this kind of world she's in, because she would have been dead long ago. Because Studface, his self-restraint was just to murder other women so he wouldn't kill her. I won't lie, the romantic in me is like, oh, that's actually weirdly romantic, but also disturbing at the same time. The only thing that she possibly could have really used to trigger this is not normal is that she is such a social lower class. She is not popular. You got this guy, good looking dude, popular. Why is he with her? It doesn't make sense. But even then, all the time spent, I can't understand why it would make it really hard for Tsukasa over time to not let her guard down. Anyway, Tsukasa apologizes to Studface, who she didn't know earlier was a vampire. And after that, Studface passes out and Stalker turns on his wire and informs the rest of the cops where the victim is. Then, because Tsukasa's leg is hurt, he carries her home, and this will be the end of him. Anzai carries her home and tells her to forget his name and everything that she experienced that day. And she cries because she is feeling really stupid with herself. She didn't know anything about Studface, what he really was. And Anzai admits that Studface may have genuinely liked her, but warns her that humans and vampires were not meant ever to be together. And just then, Anzai notices a bruise on her lip and changes rapidly, grabs her, slams her against the wall like like you're watching some sort of 18+ erotica, licks the blood off her chin, tongue kisses a lot. His eyes turn blood red. Anzai manages to control himself by sticking a sedative into his leg. And after his eyes change back to normal, he informs her that he is a half vampire. He apologizes to her and leaves. The next night, now Tsukasa is already dreaming of Anzai and all the naughty touches and tongue action. She wakes up not knowing at all just how entangled she's going to get into this world. In class, Tsukasa is actively daydreaming when her professor, Ochiai, tells her to read a paragraph from their study book. While reading, her mind wanders to Studface because he disappeared without ever popping up on the news, and the information goes around that he is relocated to Canada. And because she has not seen Anzai since, Tsukasa is beginning to doubt whether the event actually happened or not. But her dreams at night are always very lucid. When she gets home, Tsukasa opens her window and, oh shoot, there's Anzai right outside, and he turns away flustered and asks her how she is and whether she wants to see Studface. Now, frankly, she doesn't give a hoot about Studface. Just then he gets info about another case and disappears without saying goodbye. But his wallet falls off. And of course, as we know, she runs straight to where the police are confronting a vampire. Now, the female vampire is all bloody because she tried marrying a human. The dude got injured with a knife and asked his vampire wife to suck the blood off his finger. Of course, he became Vampire Chow in no time. Anzai gives her a piece of his mind for being so careless with her lover, and then the cops take her away, and later he returns to Tsukasa's room to scold her for showing up at the crime scene. Then of course he comes like very doting, kind of like mother vibes, and scolds her properly when he realizes that she didn't even shut her door properly. She shows him the wallet and makes him apologize, and then she invites him on a date because clearly she's into bad boy vibes. Anzai agrees, of course, and leaves, but he gets a call from his superiors and heads down to their meeting point at a cafe. There he gets a first batch of sedatives to control his, well, impulses. The team informs him there's a new law that allows going to Pound Town between vampires and humans as long as they both agree and have a doctor present. That evening, Tsukasa goes to Professor Ochiai's office to return the book she borrowed, and he decides to lend her a new one. When she looks at him, she feels oddly uncomfortable, and she wants to leave, but he insists, pours some coffee. When he hands over the new book, he just grabs her and tries to tongue kiss her too, just like Anzai did. Clearly, there's something going on here. Now, at first, she thinks, oh, he's also a vampire trying to get high on some blood, but when she punches the glass and cuts her hand, nothing happens to him. So he's just a regular pervert, and he tries to fondle her, make out with her again. Tsukasa grabs the curtain and pulls it apart to scream. Now, in that moment, her knight in shining armor is already outside. He breaks the window, throws hands with Professor, knocks him off his feet, and plummets him with a barrage of punches until Tsukasa stops him, and then he makes her call the cops and runs out before anyone can catch him. Now, then Anzai notices that he's got some of her blood on his palm. He licks the blood and spends the evening, you-know-whatting to the taste of her blood. However, he never shows up at her door again. Instead, he just watches from a distance until he finally decides to stop in the middle of the night when she's meant to be asleep. She's awake and they hug because she's not afraid of him. He tells her that he's been suspended from work for attacking a human. Tsukasa meets up with her friend and spills the tea on Anzai and their, pseudo-relationship. He's been coming to her house often, and they eat dinner together. Meanwhile, on her way home, she runs into a dude with eye bags like Anzai's, and he helps her pick her groceries and runs away. Anzai shows up just after he leaves, grabs the bags, and they head home. The news covers another death they think was caused by a vampire, because there were stab wounds and lots of blood loss. Anzai thinks the man who bumped in Tsukasa earlier was the main suspect, but Tsukasa points out he couldn't be, because he had similar eye bags like Anzai, and he had not been drinking any blood. And just when he's about to get down and nasty with Tsukasa, the suspect shows up at the window. Meanwhile, the police have a hard time explaining to the shop owner where the victim was murdered, and they haven't found the culprit. The shop owner is certain it was done by a vampire. Jill suddenly grabs him by his shirt and asks why he smells of blood. The police arrest the shop owner on Jill's instruction, and turns out he was trying to frame the vampire dude. Back at home, the vampire dude introduces himself as Ryonosuke, and the cops confirm that he's their former suspect. They send a car to fetch him. While waiting, he explains that he ran away from the murder scene because if he stayed any longer, he would have killed his boss. But he's a good vampire, and he doesn't want to hurt anyone. How cute. When Jill shows up, she teases Anzai about coming to her place later, and it makes Jill cry because she's jealous of how Jill looks. But Anzai assures her that he's all hers. Now, their cute moment is cut short. She starts running a temperature. While watching her, Anzai can feel his temperature rising, so he heads out and sedates himself. Meanwhile, the cops are dealing with a new problem. Another random vampire has just been killed by a bullet. This is the 5th by their count. When they head back, they announce that someone is hunting devils. Jill uses the opportunity to tease Anzai about his relationship and asks him to come blow off some steam with, but instead they just get into a fight. Superiors separate separate them and announce they would need to be careful with a vampire hunter on the loose. After he leaves, Anzai grabs a gift for Tsukasa and he has no idea he's being stalked. He takes the gift to her place, and she's surprised to see him at the front door, so she lets him in, and he draws close to her and they have a very nice kiss. But then his blood splatters because there's a sniper not far away from Tsukasa's house. The sniper shoots again, and Tsukasa stands in the way of the flying shards because, well, she's an idiot, and one piece tears her face. Anzai sees her blood and he gets mad. His eyes turn red and he almost attacks her, but she touches his face and retains his sanity, and then rushes out of the building in the direction of the sniper to do some damage. The sniper tries to run away, but I mean, come on, she can't really outrun a freaking superhuman vampire hybrid. He throws it to the ground and asks what her motive is, and she mouths off her disgusted vampires because his skin touched hers. Because her mother was killed by a vampire. That's when she grabs another gun and shoots him straight through his belly. Okay, look, there's some lapses going on here in Public Security Division 5. We gotta do it quickly. Look, they have the info that vampires were being targeted. Shouldn't they discuss more from what we've seen, countermeasures to adequately protect these guys? If that's what they're supposed to do. If you consider them to be a part of the team and essentially important to the work they do in the special division, then maybe prioritize their safety. The fact that Anzai was allowed to walk out of the bar with a killer on the loose shows one of two things. Either they're understaffed or just how lax and uncaring their security apparatus is. There's gotta be a lot of changes right away. First off, these people are essential to our operations, so no big movements from our precious vampires Anzai and Jill. Even if it requires some severe persuasion, heck, even tranquilizing them, send them to a safe location in a van somewhere, give us some time to figure out how to deal with the assassin, because currently we're in the dark. Let's review what we know. Assassin kills vampires despite them looking exactly like human beings when they have not morphed, means they gotta have some kind of way to detect or track or figure out who is a vampire and who isn't. And with Anzai always screaming out about how cold his temperature is, it's pretty easy to guess they're using maybe some kind of infrared technology to detect body heat. So the first thing you gotta do, give them some form of protection against infrared cold detectors. For instance, they could have easily gotten Anzai and Jill some heated clothing, heated blankets, keep their temperature close to that of a normal human being, make it more hard for these guys to notice who's a vampire and let them be undetected. Don't even start on Anzai. He's a freaking half vampire. They got the whole package: speed, hearing, smell, everything. Yet he got stalked by a human. Didn't detect it. What's worse, he goes into class combat with a human, loses. Holy smokes. Don't just trust your combat skills and your vampire awesomeness. You had no reason to lose. All you had to do is disarm the sniper, take away the weapon. Don't talk, don't ask her, get rid of the weapon first. How about that? The arrogance is astounding. Luckily, this white-haired dude from before shows up, grabs Anzai by the leg just before he plummets to his death, and he realizes that Anzai would die if he does nothing. So he grabs a vial of blood, forces it down Anzai's throat, and just like that, poof, wound heals, but it comes with some repercussions. While Anzai is out cold and recovering, the sniper tries to shoot the white-haired dude, but the white-haired guy dodges the bullet. When she tells him the sad story of how her mother was, well, killed by a vampire husband, he points out the problem was with her mother's poor choice in men, not fact that the guy was a vampire. Now, Anzai opens his eyes, and the first thing he does is attack because he's lost his mind. Back at home, Tsukasa reports what happened to the cops, and when they suddenly announce that his temperature is rising, and to make matters worse, Tsukasa, like every love-struck female protagonist, asks them to take her where her man is, and they agree. Of course they do. She explains that Anzai didn't lick her wound. They can't deny that temperature is rising. Back in the field, white-haired Kun proves that he's superior to Anzai because despite the mind loss, he's still keeping him in his place while not trying to hurt him. That's a whole nother level of skill needed. But that's when Sniper Girl decides to join the fray by shooting some more. Anzai and Whitehair dodge the bullet and continue their battle. Now, Sniper Girl fires again, and this time she hits Anzai, but his wound heals almost immediately. He attacks her again, but then a car comes out of nowhere into the mist, divides them. Sniper Girl calls the dude in the car 07 and joins him to run away. Anzai tries to chase after them, but Whitehair guy stops him. That's when cops show up with Tsukasa. Despite being told to stay at the shelter, Jill shows up, joins the fray, trying to wake up Anzai. Whitehair guy introduces himself as Lihan's half-breed and informs him that he fed Anzai with blood to save his life. And while they're busy catching up, Jill gets her butt handed to her by Anzai. That's when Sniper Girl tries to shoot him again, and that's what makes Tsukasa desert all thoughts of safety. She runs towards Anzai, desperate to save him from the next shot, but he's not with it right now, and he's about to take a big bite out of her neck, but Hans knocks him out while the cops sedate him and the snipers get away. Hans uses the commotion to get away also, but Anzai is kind of bummed at himself and can't even look at Tsukasa. For the next 2 weeks, Tsukasa doesn't hear anything from him. She runs into Hans and tells him that she hasn't seen Anzai since the incident. Hans explains that he's feeling guilty. That's when Tsukasa decides to use Han as a lab rat and learn all she can about vampires or devils. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Anzai doesn't leave his room, partly because he was suspended and he also feels guilty for being a monster. Outside, Hans and Tsukasa continue the conversation. That's when she learns that vampires can't be taught to tolerate blood because Hans even drinks a bit of human blood every day, which he gets from willing donors that are his friends. Tsukasa likes the prospects of professing her love to Anzai without fear, but her daydream is cut short. They pass by an ongoing live broadcast that the broadcaster suddenly gets slashed by a random attacker immediately near vampire, losing his self-control and jumps onto her on live TV. Now, the Special Division 5 watch the live broadcast and see the moment vampires get exposed on live TV. Even Jill, who's watching the broadcast far away from actual blood, is having a hard time controlling bloodlust. Anzai helps keep her in check until the team sedates her. Now, he's back in duty because, he's like wearing this weird mask now. While there, he spots Tsukasa and Hans on live TV. Hans leaves Tsukasa and goes to take care of the vampire by knocking him out. That's when this random dude shows up, starts filming him, eagerly asking him to murder the vampire. That's when Hans realizes that something is fundamentally wrong. Meanwhile, Tsukasa gets attacked while trying to protect a child from a vampire, and the vampire chases her into the subway. But then the knight shows up in shining armor, saves her, and heads out. But then he spots two people watching them from another building. Before leaving, Anzai gives her a vampire sedative, and when he's about to leave, she does the Sakura thing and cries about him leaving, so he gets her to use one of the sedatives on him. While they're alone, she kisses his neck, and they're about to take a one-way trip to you-know-where town, but then he hears the sound of another gunshot. Anzai and Tsukasa get talking about Hans, how Anzai figures out how they're gonna figure it out, and how they're from the same orphanage called Enlow, a place that takes in devil orphans and races them. After a while, Anzai breaks out and asks why Tsukasa can stand him because he is a half vampire, but she points out that she's in love and it's all cute and whatever. While they're being lovey-dovey, they get caught by a group in search of vampires and they have to hide. But Anzai's sedative hasn't worn off, so he makes Tsukasa grab the handrail just before he plummets. Now, of course, Hans saves him again, and this time Hans points out that Anzai is pretty weak for a half-breed. After the incident, the government sets up an investigative panel to look into vampires, but the aftermath of this choice is going to be bad for both humans and vampires. Later, Anzai's teammates show up and introduce Anzai to this dude named Kikuhara, but as soon as Tsukasa sees him, her spidey senses go off crazy. Anzai feels like he's met him before. He just can't figure out where. He can't put his finger on it. After the encounter, Hans, Tsukasa, and Anzai head down to the Special Division 5's hideout. Yuki here refuses to let Tsukasa stay in his place. However, they stay in the same building though. Before leaving, their supervisor, named Sawazaki, assures Anzai and Jill that irrespective of what the investigative panel decides, they will always have a place in Special Division 5. Now, the snipers. Their plan B didn't go as planned, and this babe that tried to kill Anzai is in trouble. Her teammate dashes at her with the same knife used to kill the reporter and stabs her in the belly because they believe that she won't be able to kill humans, and some humans have to die for the sake of the goal. And at the same time, Tsukasa approaches Anzai with the news that drinking blood could increase his life expectancy. So she offers herself as like a full-on blood bank, satisfies cravings at any time. Elsewhere, after killing Sniper, her killer goes on to report to their boss. This dude, but he gets stabbed in the belly because Kikuhara doesn't like leaving loose ends, and eliminates all of his former teammates because that was the original plan B.
Look, your government trying to clamp down on information about specialized class of individuals in society, and you still are letting this happen? Seriously? Like, for one, maybe take some steps to introduce measures informing the media. Wherever there's a public broadcast being aired, you should have really worked some magic to vet, maybe via special committee or something, on vampire-related materials, because until the vampire problem in the country is solved, there honestly should not be major live broadcasts from any news outlets, because you have this huge group of zealous crazies, and they wouldn't be able to target unsuspecting reporters just for the sake of exposing members of the media team who are vampires. Anything about vampires, pre-record it, screen it for compliance with the law and vampire secrecy for the time being. So just start censor all the media. You have a unit responsible for tackling vampire cases. There were no publications about vampires, so just amplify that even more. Don't let any news of vampire stuff leave your fingers. But no, you didn't do that, did you? Anzai storms at Hans and hooks him for feeding Tsukasa a false dream. But Hans stands his ground and explains some things to Anzai before pointing out that if Anzai is too afraid to face who he really is, he would never be able to protect anyone. Meanwhile, Jill learns that Sawazaki filed a false report because their report doesn't show that Anzai was actually shot in the chest and that the wound healed thanks to the blood. Sniper Girl wakes up and finds herself face to face with Kikuhara. He informs her that her friend had been kidnapped and would soon be killed. Also at their police conference, the cops report that multiple vampires have been killed in a string of rising killings starting from the day of the live broadcast. They deliberate on the number of things, but decide to relieve all vampires in Special Division 5 of their duties
until further notice, because they're, well, trying to save public face. In his room, we see Hans realizing that Enlow has some special backing, because despite the ban on blood drinking, they were conducting experiments on blood drinking. Tsukasa spends her night in another lewd dream with the boo-boo, but when she wakes up, she gets a call from her classmate. When Tsukasa reveals that vampires are real to her friend, poor Miwako just can't take the news, and she gets even more worried because she realizes that Tsukasa's boo is a vamp, well, half vamp. At the same time, the cops get a tip about Kikuhara pushing someone off of a roof, so they decide to investigate it. But when they go to check on the informant, he's being attacked by a hooded killer. They chase the guy and run past Anzai's room. Anzai spots the dude, and he chases after the human attacker together with Hans. However, when Hans tells him Anzai his real name, Anzai realizes that he knows next to nothing about Enlow. And at the same time, Jill complains that her team has never monitored her heart rate. And that's when we learn that they only monitor Anzai due to a special request from Enlow. And before his attacker can kill him, Hans arrives on the scene and knocks the stuffing out of him. When Anzai shows up, he gets angry at Hans for hitting the dude too hard, because now he's bleeding, and poor Anzai is afraid of going berserk. But that's when Hans points out that Anzai isn't going berserk, because his true trigger isn't the sight of blood. When the guy gets up again, Anzai knocks him down for good. After, Anzai's superior shows up, and when he realizes that the attacker wanted to kill Vamp Dude because of what he saw, he tells Anzai to take Vamp Dude to their hideout and not answer any questions from the investigations team. It's all because they finally realize there's a mole in their special division. Meanwhile, none of them notice they are all being watched by this old dude in glasses. Now, Anzai delivers Vamp Dude to the special division. They decide to take him to the hospital, and Anzai's really going overkill about talking to Tsukasa. Joins the crew to take the Vamp Dude to the hospital. Now, they tell this dude named Makimura that they have arrested the attacker. What they don't know is that he just finished raiding a spot on his own. When the call ends, he calls his other group and informs them that their agent has been captured, because it turns out Makimura is a double agent, not the only one. When they get to the hospital, Tsukasa immediately gets in trouble. The sniper girl from before rushes at her, grabs her neck, and uses her as a hostage to get away from the hospital and the police. As they leave in the car, Tsukasa has a conversation. Despite the show she puts on the outside, turns out the girl doesn't really have the balls to do anything to Tsukasa. That's because she only kills devils. She has a moral code. But when she tries to talk to Tsukasa and get her against the devils, Tsukasa points out that her boo-boo is a devil. Sniper girl feels that Anzai is only after her blood, but when she gets a rude shock when she learns that Anzai even rejected her offer of blood. They arrive at the location. Sniper girl asks Tsukasa to leave, but instead of getting away, Tsukasa decides to be all noble and asks the sniper girl to get herself treated because she's bleeding. And after that, sniper girl links up with her old comrade, who is being held in custody, and it's all cute and great. And at the same time of that, the stalker guy from before shows up at Anzai's hideout and introduces himself as a doctor, Enlow. He scolds Anzai for being too overprotective of Tsukasa, and he keeps pushing until he makes Anzai confess that he's afraid of the vampire part of himself. The doctor makes a sharp distinction between Anzai and Hans, and basically tells Anzai to be more like Hans, because Hans has learned to control his inner demon. Doc tells Anzai he's gotta do the same thing if he wants to protect Tsukasa, but the conversation is cut short when they learn that his girl has been kidnapped. And while they're busy panicking, thinking of how to save her, Tsukasa goes along with her kidnappers and helps them get to their hotel lodge. Now Anzai wants to do the whole knight in shining armor thing again, but the team dislodges him by reminding him that Sniper Girl only hates vampires and not humans. He'll be putting her at risk just by showing up. Now the cop under Kikuhara tried to find Sniper Girl, but they don't know that this is all going according to his plan. Meanwhile, Anzai and his team learned that Makimura was a mole, and now they're considering chasing after him too. And despite everything, Anzai decides to rescue Tsukasa, and Hans offers to join him. In the hotel, Tsukasa parts way with her captors, but before they leave, Sniper Girl warns her to be wary of some dude named Naoya with a patch on his face because he is also a mole. Now unfortunately, as soon as Tsukasa heads out, her bad luck, she runs into the guy right there! Tsukasa tries to play cool, but his first question throws her off her guard. She's a bad actress, but she manages to give him the slip by stunning the daylights out of him. She uses the opportunity to run into a room and hide. Then Naoya bursts into the room and threatens her, while Anzai and Hans search for her location. Naoya informs her that he belongs to the CCC, a chosen civil community. But that's when Hans and Anzai appear on the roof just in time to find Tsukasa about to fall to her death, and that's when Anzai proves the power of love, jumps off the building, morphs almost into a full-on vampire, and he catches Tsukasa and grabs the wall with his claws. Well, stuff's about to go down. Tsukasa is being way too much of a whiny, thinking of her only options are either fall to her death or wait for Anzai to come saving her. What if you just brought other players? Distractions. Sniper Girl already paved the way for Tsukasa to escape, okay? All she had to do was play it cool, call for more attention, since the goal is to get away from Naoya, and avoid being alone with him at all costs. Make it impossible for him to have us all to himself. Tsukasa's first and costly mistake was giving the rescue team the impression
impression that she was fine and could walk on her own. Though she did it to prevent Naoya from carrying her, she went about it the wrong way. Give the cops a proper show, wailing, screaming, gnashing of teeth, all that jazz. Attract a lot of attention from every passerby possible. Force people into like a bystander effect where everyone is unable to act, but also unwilling to leave the scene without knowing what happens to the victim. Even if he manages to overcome the bystander effect, he won't have private time because lots of people have gathered, thanks to the earlier tantrum, and they won't leave him. Don't even get me started on the whole choosing to fall over getting shot. She entered the room, there were a lot of things she could have done. Block the knob of the door with the chair in the room, that would have bought her some time to slip out of the window. She resigned herself to her fate far too soon. That way, she would have had more time to maybe have help come without having to fall out of a window like a damsel in distress.
Hans tries to take Tsukasa from Anzai, but he notices that despite being in full-on vampire mode, his sanity is retained, and this is unprecedented. The reunion is cut short when Makimura starts shooting at them. Now, Sniper Girl is still on the roof. She has a change of heart because Anzai and their cute love moment, so she helps them shoot Makimura. After getting to safety, Anzai informs Tsukasa he wants to try the doctor's experiment, but he needs her help to do it. But of course, Tsukasa puts on her stud face and agrees to help him because she cares for him. It's all mushy gooey. And they finally become like officially a couple. They have like officially their full-on official first kiss. When they get back, Doctor gives them a room to, well, have sex. All part of Anzai's self-control training, of course. They jump at the opportunity and get to work, kissing and smooching. Doc monitors Anzai's heart rate. Although his face changes, Anzai manages to keep himself in check and doesn't lose control. After the experiment ends, Anzai heads into the bathroom to take care of some business and goes back to join the team. Meanwhile, Kikuhara gets the rest of the cops to assign a new supervisor to Special Division 5 and gets Sawazaki replaced. Later, Doc takes Anzai and Tsukasa with him for a conference, and that's where Anzai runs into this woman he doesn't realize is his mother. They say some brief words and part ways. The next day, Sawazaki also learns that he's been demoted and a new dude has been put in charge of Special Division 5. While talking with his former colleague, the new boss shows up and catches them gossiping. Later, they head back to Special Division 5 and introduce the new team lead, Ishimaru. But when he notices they don't trust him, Ishimaru tells him to do a background check on him because he can't work with a team that won't trust him. After the research, Ishimaru decides to involve Sniper Girl. And to do this, he asks Tsukasa to establish a connection. If there's one thing she's good at, it's having rapport with enemies. They set up a meeting with Sniper Girl with Tsukasa as the go-between. Ishimaru presents their terms, but Sniper Girl asks them to investigate a vampire before she agrees. While they do their digging, they find out that Sniper Girl's mom was killed by a vampire from their team in the past. That's where she gets all her vampire hatred from. After getting the file and reviewing it, Sniper Girl agrees to work with them and reveals that Kikuhara is the shadow head of the CCC. But Ishimaru says they have to get some proof, and the meeting gets interrupted by citywide protests of the existence of vampires and wants their eradication. And get this, they're so creative to get the job done and make it happen, to provoke the vampires with blood, just to find the right people to kill. While the protest is on, Anzai sees a vampire being chased and gets greedy enough to look for a second knight in shining armor moment. Anzai chases the woman into the train. After helping her overcome her bloodlust, he turns around and finds himself with Professor Ochiai. Now he announces he's been stalking Anzai, but he has no idea that everything happening on this train is being live streamed. He lets his anger get the better of him and punches the professor, but he reins in his anger and gets himself under control. When the taunting doesn't work, Ochiai goes to step 2. He starts hauling blood balls at Anzai, controlling himself for so long, and he lets loose. He attacks the dude. When the train stops, Ishimaru shows up and uses some cool Aikido moves to Anzai and sedates him. The cops arrest Ochiai and promise to put him behind bars for good. Problem is that Anzai's full-on beast mode is now all over the internet.
Well, this is scary. Anzai is only an innocent half vampire trying to make the world in a better place. You can't blame me though, I'm just an innocent kid trying to look out for a fellow vamp. Well, that's what's got Anzai into this mess, and that's why first and foremost, you just leave the vampire alone. The stakes are higher than ever. Vampire hunters are prowling the land, looking for vampires to make an example of, and the government, the controllers of society, can't do anything about it apparently. Not the time to play hero or think about saving one vampire. No, just leave it alone. If I was in his shoes, only go to help her after making sure I'm not gonna put myself at risk. Make sure you're safe. He could have worn his mask, probably protective goggles, hide his face, make it harder for people to identify him. That would have been smart. And before going on the rescue mission, just have 2 sedatives, one for the vamp, one for myself. That way I will be able to maintain sanity because the sedatives will keep me from going crazy, and also rescue a member of the police force and thereby protecting my secret. After the incident, the number of vampire haters and protesters increased dramatically. Instead of sweating the small stuff, Ishimaru decides to spar with Anzai because he wants to know how capable this guy is. And surprisingly, Ishimaru does pretty well for a human, even allows Anzai to go into vampire mode. And still, he's able to school Anzai and proves that he's got better control over his vampire side than he imagines. Ishimaru overpowers Anzai while talking
talking about his potential. And when he's about to go to stage 2 of his plan by feeding Anzai some of his blood, Tsukasa shows up and of course starts feeling jealous. Later, they meet up with Sniper Girl and her partner and they get a rundown of the CCC operatives. The CCC has operatives from 01 to 15. However, to confirm the unassigned numbers, they decide to carry out a small infiltration mission. Before they leave, Anzai talks with the doc about his memories while transformed. Turns out he has memories of meeting Kikuhara as a kid, but they're unclear. The doc says it's probably his own self trying to protect himself from a dangerous memory. Anzai heads back to his room and tells Tsukasa that he's trying to learn to control his devil. That's when she promises that until he perfects it, she won't give him any of her blood. Anzai heads out to check the home of a vampire advocate. That is on fire, by the way. And that's when he runs into Kikuhara. When he asks if they've met before, he blows him off because he can't remember his past. The team prepares for their raid and heads out for the night. But Anzai and Jill are off duty because they're, well, sort of vampires. Anzai refuses direct orders, and Ishimaru quickly assigns him to be put on the lookout team. The invasion team storms the CCC base with one mission: retrieve the CCC list. However, there's an entirely different list for them. As they rush in, Sawazaki sees someone leave out of the window. At the same time, Ishimaru finds a bunch of dead bodies. When Sawazaki checks him, he realizes he heard 3 gunshots and there are only 2 dead bodies. And all hell breaks loose. This vampire shows up and attacks them. Anzai hears their scream and ignores his order by rushing towards their direction. Meanwhile, Ishimaru and Sawazaki start fighting off multiple vampires because they walked into a trap. The dead bodies belong to vampires. Sawazaki and Ishimaru split up to reduce the number of vampires they have to face. But then Anzai rushes into the scene and saves Ishimaru. When Anzai sees his blood, he hesitates, but he remembers that Sawazaki is at stake, so he rushes off to help him too. He arrives in time to stop Sawazaki from turning into mincemeat, and even he has to bite one of the vampires in the neck just to keep Sawazaki safe. And just this once, his superior is grateful that he disobeyed orders. But they're not out of the woods yet. Someone tips off the cops falsely that some vampire hunters are in the CCC building, hunting vampires. And at the same time, one of their teammates realizes that Ishimaru is a spy because he actually works in the CCC too. And get this, he works as a double agent there too, so he's neither loyal to the CCC nor to the Special Division 5. Ishimaru reveals that Makimura is actually alive and is his teammate in the Special Division 6. Makimura tries to arrest Kikuhara, but before he can pull the trigger, he gets sniped by Kikuhara's teammate. Anzai heads to the roof and spots a lot of cops in media vehicles, while Kikuhara explains his long plan. And when he's done explaining, he grabs Makimura's gun, shoots Anzai, and now our dude finds himself on the cold hard floor, bleeding out. Now, as usual, Tsukasa throws all caution to the wind as soon as she hears this. She asks Hans to take her to Anzai. They rush down by jumping from building to building, and she gets there just before he's dead. Tsukasa gives him some of her blood down Anzai's throat, and he takes a dig into her and takes a gulp to get himself back to life. And as soon as his wounds heal, Hans instructs a nearby policeman to inject him with a sedative. They all live to fight another day. After he gets out of the death situation, Hans takes Tsukasa to a near ambulance on his own, and Anzai finally remembers everything his mind's been trying to bury. Turns out he met Kikuhara as a child, and even got to meet up with his father, a murderer vampire, but the event traumatized him. When he wakes up, the police let him see Tsukasa one last time before the court sentenced him for harming civilian by biting her. They ban him from seeing her for life, and while discussing for the last time, Tsukasa promises to wait to get better and it's all cute and lovey-dovey. That's how our story ends.